an unidentified flying object.
Researcher on a mission with Dr. J.N. Elias.
We have an unidentified flying object.
All right, welcome back to another great episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the City of Demons. That's right, you heard me, folks. City of Demons, La La Land, Hollywood, whatever you want to call it. And as always, we have a super amazing show for you today. But before I introduce my guest for this evening, let me give you a quick outlook on tomorrow's guest. And the reason why I'm doing that this early is because for those of you who've had experiences or anything like that, I don't want you to say I ambushed you by setting this person up or anything like that. Tomorrow is going to be not just a skeptic, but a debunker. So just be prepared. He's a very, very intelligent person. A lot of the things that, for instance, flat Earth and stuff like that, me and him absolutely see eye to eye. But there's obviously stuff that me and him don't see eye to eye on, such as some of you who have contacted me with your own experiences with ETs and abductions and contacts, etc. So don't take it personally. Just enjoy the show. Now, let's get to today's show, which I am very, very excited for. As you could have already read from the bio, and what you've already seen from what we've already done some promotion on our guest tonight, we have what you would call an Aquanaut. And more importantly, me and her have a lot more in common, even though I've never been scuba diving, but because I'm a skydiver. And I know that's kind of hard, but ironically, when I was practicing to get out of student status and to get my A license, had to do barrel roll, backflip, front flip. There was no better way to practice this if I didn't have the wind tunnel or the sky. And wind tunnels in that year when I started were very sparse. But I had a pool, and that's where I learned to master what I needed for my A license. Now, that should probably be more than enough for you guys all to know what the topics are about what we're going to speak in today. So let me just go ahead and introduce for you today's guest. She is the one and only Jill Heinerth. Jill, welcome to the show.
Hey, nice to talk to you.
Oh, it's a true pleasure, and I love talking about anything that has to do with adrenaline, like scuba diving, but also there's just so much life down there. And even if you were one of those niche areas like cryptozoology for aquatic creatures, that right there is like hours and hours. So one thing I could tell you right now, Jill, is we are going to run out of time as always. Now, let me just throw a quick super shout out. First of all, to my first super chatter, the one and only Mr. Rodney Boyer. I also want to thank the one and only Mr. Nicholas Cashmore, or as I told him recently, I'm going to make him a new nickname. Instead of Cashmore, I'm going to call him More Cash. He just celebrated his 34th birthday. I think he's in Toronto. I believe so, right in Toronto, where my guest is, in Canada. And more importantly, Nick, you could correct me if I'm wrong on the city you're in, but more importantly, his birthday happened to be on the exact same day. Nick, you should know this. I'm telling you this for the first time, meaning that when I started last year, I'm not talking about when I started being a radio host in general. I'm talking about after that almost 2 years off. Last August 7th with Jerome Corsi was the first show back, and now it's been over a year. So now to my guest of the night. As I've already introduced her. I've already told you what she does. She has over 7,000 scuba dives. The title of this show that I made it is Underwater Cave Explorations. So, Jill, how did you get involved? I mean, I would think it's like the way me and you were talking, how someone offered you an AFF level 1, which for most people don't know this, for skydiving, it is in fact called accelerated freefall. Not because you're going faster in freefall, it's because it accelerates you through the course. 8 levels, and then you're on student status, meaning you could jump with your own rig until you reach A level. But that's essentially, I would think, something like that happened with scuba diving for you, right?
Well, I mean, from the earliest childhood, I wanted to be a scuba diver, but my family kind of looked at me and said, "What? People don't dive in Canada. It's too cold.
But at least it's a safer thing, better than going to your family and say, "Hey, I'm going to be a professional skydiver," right?
Yeah, yeah.
However, though, you can probably agree with this because we'll get to the depths. I'm sure you're at the very, the most you can go, but
Yeah.
actually, and a lot of people are not going to even think this is even possible. Scuba diving is far, far more dangerous than skydiving in any way.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Especially the kind of diving that I do. So I'm using like advanced life support that's exactly the same technology that we use to do a spacewalk.
Ooh.
So these are called rebreathers. And so I use that equipment to go exploring inside submerged passages in underwater caves. So when I'm using this like advanced life support, I might be like 2 miles inside the earth and there's
Two
nobody.
miles? Two
Sure,
miles? Wait,
yeah.
inside or you mean down from below sea
In
level?
inside, yeah, inside. No, I mean my deepest dive has been about 460 feet deep vertically from the ocean's or water surface, but we swim laterally down like the branches of trees, in that same kind of geometry in underwater caves. Yeah.
I actually never even thought we can go that low.
Hmm.
Let me give another super shout out. My first Patreon patron and the
Hmm.
one and only Alan A. Nakamura, who, Alan, I must thank you again. Right before I went to Hawaii, I definitely appreciate what you super chatted me with then as well. So I just wanted to give him a huge shout out, sorry, not shootout, shout out for being very supportive of this show. Now,
Awesome.
you said 460 feet, right, Joe?
Yep. Yep.
Can you break down the different depths? Say tomorrow I'm going to
Hmm.
go for my first course in scuba diving. What's the maximum
Yeah.
I can go down?
Well, people start with what we call recreational scuba diving, and your first class is shallower than 60 feet deep. And that's because it's important for a new diver to always be able to just swim to the surface when they have a problem. When someone gets more training in recreational scuba, they might go as deep as 130 feet. But beyond that is what we call technical diving, where we use different types of life support gear. We use exotic gases like helium mixes in order to deal with what's called nitrogen narcosis that can make you feel impaired underwater. So there's a lot of extra stuff, and we can't come straight to the surface because if we went straight to the surface from a deep dive, we could get decompression illness, what we call the bends.
Yes, yes, which
Yeah.
is essentially air bubbles in your blood, right?
Yeah. Nitrogen gets into your body tissues in any number of ways, and it can cause anything from pain to paralysis to death.
Yeah, and that's remember I was saying to you with all my skydiver friends, they will not jump within 24 hours, which has to be the minimum, right?
Yeah, so when you scuba dive, you have to take a little break before you go to altitude because you're lessening the pressure on your body, which can allow more of these gases to come out of the tissues and cause injury. Yeah.
Now, so okay, so how many hours under the ocean do you have to be before you can go to the next depths? I mean, how many stages are there?
Yeah.
Because I know it's going to take a long time before you can even go into caves, but just
Yeah,
people who
I
are
mean, there's a
interested.
lot of training. I mean, most people have years of active diving under their belt before they begin technical diving, and then move into cave diving because it's kind of the ultimate expression of you got to take care of anything that can go wrong, like if you lose track of your navigation, if you are suddenly in a silt out and you can't see, or in some cases there's even danger of being stuck or trapped in an underwater cave. So you got to be able to deal with all of those extreme emergencies in place on your own without help.
Yeah, because what are you going to do? There's no
Hmm.
radio for you. And
No.
even if you
Mhm.
say hypothetically scream, there's no way a sound can go through water, especially that much. You're alone unless you
Yeah,
have someone that you're scuba
yeah,
diving with and sees you in
yeah.
distress.
Right. And when we're exploring, we're going to places that no man has ever been before. So places inside the earth that nobody's documented or seen. And that's a real, niche in a niche in a niche in terms of an activity. And so you have to realize when you go in that, the best person to rescue you is already in the cave.
Yeah, yeah, too
And
late.
yeah, right. So there aren't many rescues in cave diving. It's more, body recoveries, quite frankly. Yeah.
You're mentioning cave divings, and what's popping into my head is, thankfully, this came out okay, but do you remember
Mhm.
when those Thai children?
Yep.
Oh
Yeah.
my Lord, I was
Yeah.
scared.
Those were all my colleagues and good expeditionary buddies
The
that
ones
did the
that saved them,
rescues.
you mean, right?
Yeah,
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 yeah.
absolutely. I had a call when it happened. I was in Greenland filming a documentary in the Arctic and wasn't able to go, but I stood on as a subject matter expert on all the TV channels to try and let people know what was happening. And that was an extraordinary rescue they did. And there's probably, no other person that I could think of that could have pulled that off, like that team, and especially Harry, the doctor, in the back of the cave.
Those were some
Yeah,
seriously tense moments. And I
yeah.
just thought how adorable and good it came out, because when they came
Hmm.
out, they wanted to talk about football and ice cream.
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
that's the greatest scenario, because by
Hmm.
talking about that and being all smile and laughs,
Hmm.
they didn't look like they're gonna, start folding under PTSD.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but the guy who was the furthest in the cave, the rescuer, his name's Richard Harris, doctor from Australia.
Hmm.
He's an expeditionary cave diver and an expert in wilderness medicine and an anesthesiologist. So his plan was to knock the kids out with a drug cocktail and then tied them up, put them in a rescue sled, and then basically they passed the kid from person to person through the underwater cave, in the blackness, in terrible conditions. And every half hour or so, the kid would start to wake up from the anesthesia. And so the other cave divers, who are not doctors or medical technicians, had to reach into their dry suit pockets, pull out a syringe, re-inject the kid, and then hope that it wasn't too much and that it could, suppress their breathing. So it was
Which is the worst
really
thing. You don't want them to
right.
have the suppressed breathing when they are already struggling,
Yeah.
where they couldn't even move, right?
They
They
yeah. They
and
were
wasn't one of
knocked
the
out and tied up.
children, his mask couldn't even fit him?
Well, yeah, the kids were really small, and so the full face mask they put on them was a tough fit, and there were some really close calls coming out of there where they were, doing, medical intervention to take care of the kids. So it's truly a miracle that they all made it out.
It really is. And obviously,
Hmm.
we all know how much worse that disaster could have been. And
Hmm.
thankfully, we are all happy. And I know
Hmm.
I was praying for the poor kids and their families
Yeah,
should anything happen.
yeah,
And the divers. I mean,
yeah,
they were all
yeah.
people that I was worried about and wanted to
Sure.
make sure I kept them in prayers at night.
Hmm.
Now, I'm going to deviate
Hmm.
slightly, because I want to address the 800-pound gorilla that I put in the title,
Hmm.
Mr. James Cameron.
Oh,
Yeah. So,
yeah,
spill the beans, Jill.
yeah.
How did you get involved with him? What was it
Hmm.
for? What did you do with him? Floor
So
is
there's
yours.
a movie out there, a 3D cave movie called Sanctum, and it was actually written and produced by friends of mine, and James Cameron was the executive producer. So this was his early forays into the whole 3D stuff that became Avatar. So he came down to Florida to work with my colleagues and I on shooting the what they call the pitch trailer for Sanctum, and that was like testing of the HD cameras and seeing what the whole cave diving environment's all about. And I got to take him on his very first cave dives and serve as the stunt person for this pitch trailer. So through the experience, I got to do some really fun stunts, including one where I was breathing off a set of double tanks, and I was pushing them through this tiny little restriction, and he's shooting it on 3D. And then I let the tanks like fall off the edge of this cliff and rip the breathing device out of my mouth. And so I look around, I've got nothing to breathe, I'm in the cave, and I look up to the ceiling and I see small, like, air pocket bubbles on the ceiling. And so I go to the ceiling and I start sucking up this air and breathing it breath by breath to work my way out of the cave. And he was totally blown away by that little stunt and asked me how I'd learned to do it. At which time I told him that was the very first time. And that ends up being, spoiler alert, one of the big stunts in the Sanctum movie.
When was this released? The movie.
Yeah.
What year was it released?
Oh boy, that's probably 6 or 7 years ago now, easily. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to check it out. That's for darn sure.
Yeah.
So let me ask you. I saw this early on in the chat, and I think it was just something amazing that we should bring up. This was written early on by the one and only birthday boy, Nicholas Cashmore. He said that while being underwater, I'm sure you found some decent shipwrecks. Have you?
Some wrecks? Shipwrecks? Yeah. I do a lot of shipwreck diving all over the world. Even here in Canada, war wrecks and all kinds of things.
Did you come up with any crazy chests full of gold and diamonds and all the good stuff that we're looking for?
Well, here's the thing. I work mostly on scientific teams, and so that means we don't take or remove any artifacts. So even when we find something really significant, we do it for the sake of science and documentation. So yeah, I found things that I would consider treasure-like. But
you can take them for the principle.
I did find a wad of cash once inside a shipwreck, which was pretty cool. So it was a big, fat, folded over wad of U.S. bills.
Okay, so this begs the next question. So we're talking about American bills, and that clearly has to be after, we were a country in the U.S. here. So post 1776, maybe even say post 1800, just anywhere. Point being is, can you describe the ship? Did it look like something from the early 1800s, like a cutter, or did it look more like a World War I era destroyer or something like that?
This was a recent wreck, actually. It was a big boat called the Roatan Express that went down off of the west coast of Florida in a winter hurricane, basically, so a weird storm. And when the boat was going down, the crew and the captain and his girlfriend climbed on the sinking vessel while the Coast Guard came out. And everybody was plucked off of the vessel except for the captain and his girlfriend, who at the last moment went running back into the ship because of something they wanted to retrieve. And the rumor from the rest of the crew was that they went back for some rare bottle of wine, and they went down with the ship. So I went to the wheelhouse and then the captain's quarters looking for whatever this rare bottle of wine might be, and that's where I found the cash, was inside his room in the shelf in his closet.
And how much cash would you estimate?
Well, here's the funny thing. It was probably thousands of dollars. And what I did, since it was the beginning of my dive, is I set it inside a glass fixture, and I set it by the descent line that led back to the boat. And then I went back inside to look for more stuff. And when I came back, some other people on the dive team had found my little pile of cash, and they had it out and were like waving it around going, woohoo! And in the process of doing that, all the outer bills were destroyed. So all the hundreds were destroyed. So in the end, I ended up with $320.
Hey, that's $320 you didn't have before you went.
And a good story.
Right?
And a good story.
Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes the story is way better than the money.
Yeah. Now, at the beginning of the broadcast, you were talking about animals underwater, and I thought that's what you were going to be talking about when you said elephant in the room.
Oh, no. I was saying the elephant in the room, because I put that in the title. You addressed it. We can get past the elephant. When I was mentioning animals early on, Jill, I was talking cryptozoology in general, but specifically for you, the aqua cryptozoology.
Yeah. Oh, we've got some pretty weird animals inside of caves. We get cave adapted life that lives its entire life cycle in the blackness of a cave. So it never comes out, never sees the sunlight, lives chemosynthetically instead of photosynthetically. And some of
Chemo,
these,
as
yeah,
in
so they're living off of like sulfur and
fissures. You mean
other.
fissures of from the earth, or
They're really similar to the stuff that you see on those deep ocean smoking vents, but
ah?
some of these animals, like there's crayfish that live in the cave that have no eyes and no color, so they're white albino appearance, and they have some really unusual sensory organisms. There's one animal that, if it was the size of a cat, it would be the deadliest thing on earth, but it's only like an inch or two long. It's called remipede, and it's got venomous fangs and pincers, and it can attack something like 40 times its size, neutralize it with its venom, and then suck the life out of the insides of the animal. And this thing lives its entire life in the darkness without eyes. So really, like, interesting stuff happening inside the earth, where people would never see it.
Now, let me ask you this. Recently, and when I say recently, I'm talking the last several decades, we found out that light is not necessary for life.
That's right. Yeah, it's absolutely right. And that's how a lot of these animals are living, like without need for the sun.
Which
Yeah.
really blows over the whole fact of looking for Goldilocks planets. But yeah, for us, because we have to be above water. But then, like, aside from Goldilocks planets, where you have aqua life that doesn't need the sun, so we don't have to worry about that. But let's go back to, say, 65, 66 million years ago, when the asteroid strike that killed the last stage, the dinosaurs, right?
Yeah.
I always recently argued, because of that statement, that they could live literally at the bottom of the ocean, no light, from the heat and other things like you mentioned, like the sulfur, things like that. What if there were things like a megalodon shark or other things that survived underwater?
Well, there are things that have survived underwater that predate the extinction of the dinosaurs. So that remipede I was just talking about, even though it's just little, it is a living, swimming dinosaur. It hasn't evolved at all since before the asteroid Chicxulub hit the Yucatan Peninsula. So somehow these animals within the matrix of the planet survived that mass extinction event and are still around today. And there's other, small life. So, is there bigger life? I don't know. Maybe, maybe.
I wouldn't be surprised. That's why I mentioned the Megalodon shark, because a lot of people have argued the same thing, as you said, that things that predate the extinction of dinosaurs are still in the oceans. And there seems to be a lot more videos that are not CGI, by the way. Let's make that clear, because there's so much BS online that look to be like either some sort of huge shark that's much larger than anything that's normally supposed to be, like a great white or anything like that, and yet has features like the Megalodon, including those really large teeth that you don't really find in other sharks.
Well, I mean, look at the giant Humboldt squid. For many years, we thought that was, not real because we hadn't found a real one. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really remarkable life in our oceans, and we're just beginning to explore it.
When you say the jumbo squid, I'm assuming you're referring to like the giant squid that takes down ships and things like that, right?
Yeah, I don't know if they take down ships, but
the myth,
huge,
but the point is they exist.
They're huge. They found them live and dead now.
Yeah, I know that fishermen using nets, going back as late as the end of 1800s, off the coast of Japan and other places around the world, they just get caught in the nets to the point that they can't even lift them onto the ship.
Yeah.
Now, there is something else in here. Let me go back and find it. Let's make sure I can get to it. And Nicholas, thank you for putting your question in caps. And please, everybody, write them in caps so I can easily find your question, as opposed to zipping through the comments to try to find the question. So here it is. What about underwater megaliths like in Japan?
Oh, like previous civilization and things like that?
Yeah, maybe like an
Yeah.
underwater pyramid,
Mhm.
underwater cities, buildings,
Yeah.
anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of things that people have reported that are either, archaeological remains or things that look a little too uniform for geology to have produced naturally. I mean, the ocean levels have changed dramatically on Earth, even in recent history. I mean, even in recent human history, there's been 400 feet of sea level change, and so that means that lots of things that used to be topside are submerged. So, yeah, that's certainly the kind of things that we're interested in looking for, and some will never know whether they're actual things built by humans or
Something
by
else, right?
geology. Yeah,
Yeah.
who knows?
Now,
Yeah.
when we were talking about the shipwrecks, and you said you work for a scientific, what group, or what did you call it? Not
Oh,
community, but
yeah. So I collaborate with a lot of scientists. So sometimes I'm working with people from universities or
hmm.
some people on specific research projects. I work with Bob Ballard who found the
Ah,
Titanic.
yeah, yeah. Were
Yeah,
you on
yeah.
the ship that day?
Not when he found the Titanic. No, I was
Okay.
just recently on a project with him down off the Channel Islands in
Ooh,
California.
yeah, right. Not too far from me. When I was in Santa
Yeah.
Barbara going up for my
Mhm.
undergrad, and I used to come back to LA all the time, I used to always look into the Channel Islands and be like, darn, I
Mhm.
need to swim out there or do something, because there's no one there. I know
Well,
they're
what's
private
interesting is there
land.
probably were people there at other sea level stands, and that's part of what our project is about. So, there's 6 different steps where the sea level stayed long enough to actually create caves in the Channel Islands. And we're exploring those underwater caves now because those would have been caves when the ocean was lower and when people lived out there. So we'll be looking for signs of human habitation or use in those places.
Now, one of the reasons I brought it back to the scientific people, the
Hmm.
communities that you work with, is because you don't have to pay for your scuba dives anymore, do you?
No, this is my full-time job. Yeah.
Oh, you're doing what you
Yeah,
love and you're getting
I
paid for it.
am.
That is the meaning of
Hmm.
success right there.
Yeah, yeah, it's a bit of a hybrid career to keep me in the water. So I'm a writer, I'm an underwater filmmaker, cinematographer, and
I'm just like that
and
sounds
yeah,
like me as far as the sky.
yeah,
I'm also a free fall photographer,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and if I spent more to get more jumps and got to my C license, which I could do coach jumps and film students on with my camera
Mhm,
because I could only
mhm,
film other jumpers right now. I have
mhm,
a B license, but when I hit D, I could take people up on tandems, I could take
mhm,
people up for AFF,
mhm.
etc. But it's the same thing. Like there
Yeah,
is an option. You're not going to become some sort of rich guy, but I never am looking for that anyway. I'm just always looking for happiness. But what a
yeah,
better way! You're getting paid to
mhm.
do exactly what you want. What else can
Absolutely.
go wrong? So
Yeah, yeah, and it's an interesting career. Every week is different, and that keeps it fun.
now, Russell Grant has two questions for you. Let me
Hmm.
go back
Hmm.
to his first one. What are some of the geographic, oh, sorry, not geographical. What are some of the geophysical sensing techniques used to find targets underwater?
Oh, that's really interesting because I do work with a lot of high technology devices. So, project I was just on, we were working with a 3D autonomous mapping device. So, this is a robot that 20 years ago, I had to drive it through the cave system in order to make a three-dimensional map of the space. But now it's autonomous so that it can swim on its own, and it's a robot. It's learned through AI to explore the cave and know when to turn around and come back out and make a map while it does it. And this particular device is being tested in caves because its ultimate mission is to go to Jupiter's moon Europa and explore underneath the frozen surface in the oceans of Europa. So, that next astronaut is going to be a cave diver. It's just going to be an artificially intelligent robot.
It's ironic you mentioned Europa. I don't even know. I'd have to look it up, but I wasn't even aware of this moon. It's really small. I believe it's one of Neptune's moons, and or even Saturn's.
Jupiter.
It's only 300 miles in diameter, and yet what they're finding is that at the bottom of the planet looks like to be an eruption of water. So they've clearly indicated that it's frozen on the outside with huge rivers on the inside, because what they realized that it's H2O literally is coming out, not lava, not gas or anything like that. So that's why NASA and anybody who was involved on the Cassini probe were super excited, because on top of Europa, they say that's the place where either biogenetic organism or an astronaut diver will be looking into for life.
Yeah, basically the plan is to send a probe to Europa, and then a nuclear melt probe will actually drill through 2 miles thick of ice. And this ice is at, absolute zero, but beneath that 2 miles they are going to reach liquid water, and that's where they'll release this robot that will then swim around, make a map, search for life, and then send the telemetry back to Earth, and we'll learn about what it found.
Here is the next question from Russell. What are the ways that data is logged live on these amazing research vessels?
Yeah, so we use sonar and LiDAR like devices to do mapping, and then for me it's photography using underwater cameras and videography, and then all kinds of other scientific devices that we'll use to measure chemical composition of the water that we're swimming in, that kind of thing. So a lot of different gear, sometimes autonomous vehicles, sometimes ROVs, pretty equipment intense.
I would think so. I really would think so. Now, for retail value, let's just say the gear that you would wear on one of these expeditions without having to go back and swap the tank, just for one scuba dive, which I assume is about 2 hours air, or not?
It depends on how deep you go. So my longest dive mission was 22 hours long. I wore about 600 pounds of equipment, and between what I was wearing and what I was driving, basically underwater, I probably had like $1 million of equipment on for that dive. Wow. Yeah.
Now, you don't have to buy all this equipment. I'm assuming all the employers have purchased it for you over time because you're the skilled one that they need, right?
Well, a little bit of both. I mean, I'm kind of on the hairy edge of developing technologies as well. And so, I'm working with people building new technologies for diving. And so, yeah, I do end up spending a lot of my own money on this stuff too. But yeah, we have sponsors for things like the $1 million mapper.
I can imagine how peaceful it is and serene as you're down there by yourself, entering a cave that is either never been explored before, or if it has, there had only been a handful of people that had ever seen it, and chances are they sure as heck didn't see everything in that cave.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's I call it swimming through the veins of Mother Earth, because when you think about it, there are these, this arterial network of waterways inside the planet, and that's what I'm swimming in. And to me, it's an incredible privilege to be the first to see some of these places. I mean, I found everything from crazy geography to unusual artifacts or even human remains of past civilizations in these caves. I mean, they're like museums of natural history. So you'd never know what you're going to see.
I totally envy you, and I know a lot of people obviously paying attention to are saying the same thing, because it's such a unique career to be able to do such cool stuff. Now, Let's talk about some of the most memorable
Mm-hmm.
places that you've been to. Places is
Mm-hmm.
one, and then
Mm-hmm.
through some of the other. It's not necessarily the places, but the
Mm-hmm.
experiences that you'll never
Mm-hmm.
forget. So two different
Yeah.
categories, and
Mm-hmm.
whatever you could think of.
Yeah, I mean, I've traveled to like crazy places from, Siberia, the Ural Mountains to under the Sahara Desert, but my favorite expedition of all time was going to Antarctica to cave dive inside the world's largest iceberg. So this was 20 years ago now, but the largest iceberg in recorded history calved away from the Ross Ice Shelf, and it was the size of Jamaica. And my team and I pitched to National Geographic that we would go down there and be the very first people to ever cave dive inside an iceberg. So,
Really?
yeah, yeah. It was an insane journey just to get there, like 12 days across the Southern Ocean from New Zealand. But, um, as dangerous as that crossing was through 60-foot seas, cave diving inside icebergs was way more dangerous. And it's probably pretty fortunate that I'm here today, because that there were some close calls on that expedition.
I would absolutely think so. Let me just throw in another shout out for the most recent
Yeah.
super chat, Justin T. And he's, I'm going to read the comment. It says, much love from the Blue Crew. And I just want to give a shout out to the
Hmm.
Blue Crew, especially those who are mods. Thank you all for your support. Now, back to where you were talking about
Hmm.
diving in icebergs. Now,
Yeah.
clearly, hypothermia is one of the biggest things you have to worry about, but I'm assuming
Mhm.
with your wetsuit and other things like that, you're already warm to an extent, right?
Mm, yeah, it's never. I would never call myself warm on these dives.
Well, yeah,
It
because you have to be continually moving to not
yeah.
freeze, right?
Yeah, the water's 28 degrees Fahrenheit, so 1/10 of a degree colder, and it would be frozen solid. And we're wearing dry suits, so most of our body is mostly dry, but your face is exposed. Like your head's exposed to water, and sometimes you have issues. Like I had a glove leak in Antarctica, so I thought I was going to lose my hand. It was so
Oof.
cold, it wasn't working anymore. But these icebergs, it was just such a magical environment. I mean, we had lots of issues. Like we had calving occur when we were inside the iceberg that closed the door that we had entered through. We had a day where the current was so strong that we got swept through this massive square mile piece of ice and got deposited on the other side, out of the side of the boat, and waited and waited on the surface until they found us.
How
And
many were
then
you total?
two of us on that dive. Yeah. There's 18 people on the boat itself. Only three of us were cave divers, though, and most of the
Oh, okay.
time,
That's what I was gonna
yeah,
say. I was just because when you said
yeah,
two of you and then said 18 on the boat,
yeah.
I was wondering if that maybe you were all cave divers and they just made
No,
nine teams of
yeah.
two.
Only three cave divers on the boat. So
I
the
see.
one dive when three of us were together, we got trapped inside the iceberg by this unbelievable current that whipped up and had us pinned down inside there. And we're all like struggling with every bit of energy we could to pull ourselves along, trying to get out. And we ended up turning a 1 hour dive into a 3 hour dive in that. And after we finally escaped the ice and got back on the boat, we decided we were going to do one more dive to get the film footage that we wanted for National Geographic. And as we sat eating dinner and preparing to get back in the water again, the entire piece of ice that we'd just been inside of literally exploded
Oof.
and broke apart and turned into just a sea of slush around us. So if we'd been just a couple hours later, I wouldn't be talking to you here
Well,
today.
even if you were say, just underneath and the
Hmm.
iceberg broke and you have like a giant chunk before it
Yeah.
turns into slush when it's still
Hmm.
solid, just hits you on the head. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't even want to think.
Yeah.
But fortunately, you're here, so that's
Yeah.
what counts. That also
Hmm.
shows your skill And because you've been doing this so long, your ability to react very quickly, because it's all muscle memory for you. I would think
Hmm.
the reaction to
Hmm.
you when you sense danger is like, you already know what you're already doing it without even thinking it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to plan for the worst so that you're ready for anything. But still, when something really frightening happens, the first thing is, your mind just wants to launch off like chattering monkeys in your head, and your heart rate wants to go off, and your breathing starts to increase. But you have to immediately like tamp that down and go, no, no, we've rehearsed this. Like, I can do this, and then constantly focus on the small steps towards success and survival.
Now, let me get to some more questions before
Hmm.
I read the first one. I'm just going to read you this comment from Carol White. She said, "Hope you got inside pics of the icebergs. I couldn't find them on your site, but you said National
Oh,
Geographic was that
yeah. Yeah,
expedition for?"
yeah, it was in National Geographic magazine, and it was in, I think, in the 2002 issue. But if you go to my website, intotheplanet.com, I've got quite a lot of photography, and you can link to my YouTube page, or you can just Google Ice Island, and you can see the trailer at least for that
Aha,
movie. Yeah,
Ice Island.
Ice Island. Yeah.
And speaking of your site, which near the end of the
Hmm.
show, I do want you to plug that in again. For all you listeners out there, she's got a lot of great info, because that's where,
Hmm.
after I talked to her before I called her back to start the stream, I was exploring it, per se. All
Yeah,
right.
and I've got a book coming out too. So you're getting a
Nice.
bit of a scoop here because next week in New York City, I'm launching Into the Planet,
Ooh.
the book. So there'll be a lot of media happening next week. So you kind of beat
Well,
them
this
to
is
it.
even great. So let me get to these
Hmm.
recurrent questions, and I'm going to come
Hmm.
back to that book. All right.
Yeah.
Let me make sure I didn't pass anybody as I read them. Okay. In Antarctica, are
Hmm.
most marine animals more active during night or day?
Well, when you're down there for the Antarctic summer, you actually have 24 hours of daylight. So it's pretty crazy. Like the sun never sets when you're down there in the summer. So um, it's quite different. It almost like the way the light looks on the horizon, it almost looks like it's setting and rising at the same time, like the low light. It's quite beautiful.
No, I'll tell you why I'm so fascinated with Antarctica, and it's not because of Admiral Byrd's expedition. Of course,
Hmm.
those things are interesting to me, but the, the we all know that Earth is going through another cycle, as it's been
Hmm.
doing for billions of years, and it's inevitable that the ice caps and the polar and the polar caps
Hmm.
will melt, and
Hmm.
part of me is looking forward to that, even though I'm fearing that I'll be underwater living in LA,
Hmm. Hmm.
because underneath the ice in Antarctica, it's not just ice, there's land.
Yeah, at one time in our planet's history, that was a tropical environment. So it'd be pretty interesting to see what's beneath that 2 miles of
Right?
ice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
preserved, and
Hmm.
it's very, very exciting. So, but again, we all have to worry about, like, Tommy Shutter, who does my website. Fantastic webmaster for everybody out there. Please search him out there. He's in the chat if you guys need some site assistance. Also, let me throw this for Tommy Shutter. He is a marketing genius, so keep that in mind, folks. All right. Here's the next one for you. Carol White. Now that so much ice is melting, are more caves opening up?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, because caves are formed by water moving underground, and so when we have more dramatic changes in the water table going up and down, we do get more caves being sort of exploited or formed. And then we're still exploring new caves all the time, all over the world. So, uh, in Mexico, in Florida, in the Bahamas, in China, Turkey, all over the world, there are caves that have, never been explored by a human. And that's what we love doing more than anything.
I would imagine. I mean, you're the first
Hmm.
people there, you know, and
Hmm.
that's just like, you know, it's something I read on your in your bio, as a matter of fact, and I believe it's even on your website. You've been to places that actually are so exclusive that
Hmm.
less people have been to certain places that you've been
Hmm.
than the total number of astronauts on the moon.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, there's lots of places where I've been the only person ever to set eyes on the inside of the dark recesses of a cave, and that's why, for me anyway, I'm an artist, and bringing back images and video from these places is special to me because I want to share it.
Of course,
Hmm.
because if no one's ever seen it before, if that's what we want to do. We all
Hmm.
want to see it, you know.
Hmm.
You're putting yourself at, risk for us
Hmm.
to see it. So,
Yeah, yeah.
we all I absolutely appreciate it. Only because not only, but because of the extra layer of the fact that we have that thing in common, which is so drastically
Hmm.
different. You're diving
Hmm.
underwater, I'm going way up there and going to the sky, and we'll meet at sea
Yeah.
level, in other words. But it's the principles that we're both doing something dangerous. And remember, I was mentioning earlier how I practice my moves in the
Hmm.
pool, not the ocean, because of the currents, but things like that. So I can really appreciate it, as well are the people that are in the
Hmm.
chat, especially those who are also divers. And Tommy Shutter, by the way, he lives in Florida.
Oh
And
yeah.
he mentioned earlier up Key West. So
Hmm.
since I think I passed that comment a while ago. Let me just ask this on behalf of Tommy.
Hmm.
I'm assuming you've been to Key West scuba
Yeah.
diving, right?
Yeah, I did some of my early training in what we call trimix diving. So the use of exotic gases in order to do extra deep dives. I did my training with a man named Billy Deans, who they used to call Doctor Deep, and he was a real pioneering instructor, doing a lot of deep wrecks off Key West. There's a lot of very cool wrecks out there, like the Wilkes Barre and Curb and a bunch of others. Yeah.
I would absolutely think so. That's for darn sure.
Hmm.
I would love
Hmm.
to jump over the Key West. I have
Hmm.
someone got it for me as a gift. It's framed. It's basically a giant picture. It's not a poster, but it's like
Hmm.
something thicker than that. And it's a 10-way star. You know what a star is,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
In free fall, and it's right over the Keys, and it's so beautiful. I
Mm.
mean, it's just looking at that. I picture myself in free fall with the, hearing that wind just really rushing through you and just looking
Hmm.
down at the Keys. All
Hmm.
right, let me get back to these because there's been a lot here. People are absolutely interested. Okay,
Cool.
Nicholas Cashmore. It is said that there are bases under the Arctic. Have you seen any?
I haven't seen any. No, not yet. But
Yeah,
it's
well,
a
that's
big
the key
place.
question. You said not yet, so we'll see. Well, let me add to this.
Hmm.
You've obviously been here to LA, and I'm assuming you've been, through
Hmm.
Catalina and maybe even Malibu,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Have you heard of the Malibu cave, underwater cave entrance that is either ET or just terrestrial, meaning humans, but is meant for submarines to go somewhere else, possibly Nevada, for what
Hmm.
some people suggest that the Pacific Ocean even goes underneath California to Nevada.
Haven't heard of that. But I mean, when you think of our Earth is a big sponge, so where I can't fit, where I can't go, the water can travel.
Well, this is very, very huge, this cave. I mean, I
Hmm.
think as far as height, I think it's about 40 feet. I mean, huge. It's a lot can get in there. What I'm going to do when we're done, Jill, is I'm going to
Hmm.
get you that image. I know this
Hmm.
is just goes to show that there's something fishy about it. Google recently removed that image. They basically made it blurry. Google Earth, Google
Hmm.
something like that. Everybody was able to see it, and now for whatever reason, just like Area 51, S4, other top military installations and things that they think are not shouldn't be known to us, they decided to remove that when it was
Hmm.
very clear.
Hmm.
So
Well, it wouldn't surprise me to see a sea cave exploited for the use of like hiding submarines or stuff, but I think I would probably know about it if it traveled great distances
Yeah,
inside
yeah,
the Earth,
yeah.
but you
But
never
you
know.
know, you let me know when you're in LA, and
Hmm.
I will drive you there,
Okay,
myself.
I'll take you up on that.
Oh, yeah, yeah, for sure. All right, here, let me see here. Okay, Eagle Eye. What's the scariest thing seen while exploring underwater?
Wow. I mean, I have a lot of marine life encounters that I would say startle me from time to time. Um, I've run into all kinds of things from big pods of whales to sharks, but those are all exciting. Like I look forward to those kind of opportunities. I mean, the scariest are things are when we have gear failures or a buddy failure when your buddy panics or something.
Knock on wood.
That's
Panic is the
yeah.
worst thing you could do when you're
Hmm.
having a limited oxygen supply because the more you
Absolutely.
panic, you're going to be
Hmm.
sucking it up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would think that one of the basic things in training that, especially with you, 7,000 scuba dives, the
Hmm.
constant thing you're always working about is no matter how stressful, no matter how dangerous the situation is, remain calm.
Absolutely. And I have to start every dive with the knowledge that I am able to rescue myself, or if I have a partner in the water, that I'm willing and able to rescue them. So if I can't answer yes to those questions, then I probably shouldn't be on that dive.
And I guarantee you, you guys, when I say you guys, I mean, I'm talking about the whole scuba diving
Hmm.
community in general. You probably adopt a very similar saying, what skydivers say, which is if you are not scared jumping, then get off this plane, don't jump.
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
That's good.
because the moment people get that cockiness,
Hmm.
accidents happen. It's the show offs that
Absolutely.
die. If
Hmm.
people didn't try to test their limits, especially basically in the 80s, they've came out with squares, which I'm sure you're familiar with, the
Hmm.
rectangle parachutes as opposed to rounds.
Yeah.
They all but eliminated every single malfunction. There is,
Hmm.
in the skydiving and instructor's manual, there is every situation you could possibly have and how to get out of it. The only one that they keep going back and forth is what happens when you have your main and reserve open because
Hmm.
that could
Hmm.
really kill you in many ways. The
Hmm.
point is so then you saw a huge decrease in people that used to die from a bag lock, meaning that their
Hmm.
canopy bag came out, but the canopy never came out of the bag and they hit the ground
Hmm.
at terminal, or other things like that,
Hmm.
entanglements. And yet you started to see the increase of people trying to show off and do a hook turn, which
Hmm.
essentially is a 270-degree turn that inverts you so you can gain enough forward speed that you can do like a swoop, and maybe
Hmm.
like you're swooping a pond, where you're going a few hundred feet really fast and you'll skim your toe over the water, something like
Hmm.
that. That's how most people die. Every friend I've
Hmm.
had that's passed away, it's usually something like that,
Hmm.
unfortunately.
Yeah, with diving, it's sort of, the equivalent of pilot error. Basically, it's the choices people make before they get in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they fail to do the proper safety protocols and checklists and things like that, and make bad choices, like getting into
Bad
the water with
choices.
something that's not working perfectly.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes. And
yeah.
the one huge thing is once you're underwater, if you don't have your oxygen, you are not going to make it. I'm always able to breathe up there,
Hmm. Hmm.
so
Yeah.
wow. Well, you know what? I would really hope when I go scuba diving, it's going to be with someone the likes of you, or preferably you yourself. So,
Awesome.
all right,
Yeah.
let's see what I have for you next. I did I let me make sure I didn't go through this one. What is the most
Mhm.
prolific form of life in the very deepest of the oceans? I didn't ask that, did I?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the smallest life is the most prolific. So, plankton, basically, like phytoplankton, zooplankton, is like basically the base of the food chain. But when we get to the deepest parts of the ocean, like around these smoking vents and things, we're discovering new stuff all the time. Like we can't even catalog species as fast as we're discovering them. It's quite remarkable. So the ocean's full of life. Unfortunately, we're kind of like cranking up the acidity of the ocean right now with all the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So we're at a big, big time of change and extinctions in our oceans.
You actually, I talked, really almost answered the next question here. Let me go
Mm-hmm.
get it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And no, it's not that one. Where is it? Hold on. I think it might not be in caps, but it's absolutely here.
Mm-hmm.
Come on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, here it is. Okay, Nicholas Catchmore. What is the health of the oceans? Very important question.
Yeah, it's not in good shape right
Dire,
now.
right?
Yeah, so I mean, when I started diving, the tropical oceans were beautiful. The corals were healthy. There was, a lot more color and biodiversity. But because of the increase of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that we're experiencing right now, the oceans are acidifying. They're also getting too warm for a lot of species. So the coral is what we call bleaching. So when it gets too warm, the coral polyps that are animals like expel the animal basically, and you're just left with the sort of the rocky fossilized coral. So the tropics are in really bad shape. There's some species are migrating now to colder waters, but you might think that that would be okay, so everything just moves, except that when things move, they come and eat the food supply of another animal that's already there. So it's very difficult right now for our ocean inhabitants to adapt fast enough to all these changing temperatures, migrations, and acidity in the ocean. And the oceans are the lungs of our planet. They produce most of the oxygen that we're breathing. So if they're not healthy, it's a big problem for humanity.
And let me follow up with Nicholas's second question,
Hmm.
which is basically about this, but also about a specific event. How
Hmm.
detrimental was Fukushima for the health of the ocean?
I don't know if we know that yet, actually, and I don't even know if all of that information is really transparent. I guess. I mean, obviously, that's still an ongoing issue. There's still, radiation leaking. Um, but yeah, I don't think we know the answer. Just as we don't really know the answer, the whole, the Gulf oil spill that we had
From
years back, and yeah.
from Alaska, right? The
Oh, the
Exxon Valdez,
Valdez. Yeah, but
yeah,
then there was the blowout in the
in the
Gulf of Mexico,
yeah, which was
and
far worse than the
yeah,
Valdez.
and some of these things take a long time to express themselves. Like all the oil and the surfactant that they used to gather up the oil in the Gulf of Mexico sunk to the bottom, and so we're starting to see the problems in the bottom of the food chain, in the shrimp, and the oysters and things like that. But even today, another major problem we have in the oceans is plastic. So
Thank you for addressing that,
microplastics.
actually. That's a
Yeah.
huge thing I know when I see images. It's scary how much is being
Hmm.
dumped in the oceans.
Yeah, and it's not just like big pieces of trash. It's microplastic and plastic fibers that are ending up like, we can go to the remotest corner of the Arctic and catch an Arctic char and open up its gut and discover that it's full of plastic. So we're consuming that too, and I don't know how we're gonna get on top of that.
I don't know, and that is something that is of concern. When people talk about global warming and other things like that, I always say it's cycles. The most amount of damage we could have caused to our climate, at best, at worst, is 0.5%. I don't even think that's even possible. However, what we've done to our oceans is really, really a huge problem, very huge.
Well, I mean, in a nutshell, we've basically exceeded the carrying capacity of the planet for the way that we're living.
Yes.
So, this is what we call the Anthropocene, where it is humanity now that is changing the Earth faster than any normal cycle could predict,
Do
basically.
you?
Yeah.
This is pure speculation, unless, of course, you've had
Hmm.
discussions with the other people that you
Hmm.
work. Do you think that we are beyond the point of no return with what we've done to our oceans? I mean, I would think some of the
Hmm.
species are either endangered, if not have gone extinct already.
Yeah. Boy, I guess, in my heart, I'm an eternal optimist, so I
Ah,
can't give up on,
the hope.
us being able to make changes to protect the planet. But we are under a mass extinction event right now, and some of that's obviously irreversible. I mean, we're losing species faster than ever before, and there are some things that we can do to to improve our footprint on the planet, and maybe slow that down a bit. But I think we're going to need to look to ingenuity and technological engineering for some of the solutions.
This next one, I believe I already asked you. It might be just a copy and repaste. It was, what's the scariest thing seen while exploring underwater? So I did ask you that, if I'm
Yeah,
not mistaken. So
yeah,
let me go
yeah.
find the next one. Okay.
Mhm.
What would be the most effective way to find remnants of a civilization on Antarctica?
Mm. Well, you probably need some sort of sensing technology that would allow you to look through that 2 miles of ice cap on top of Antarctica, because there's a lot of snow and ice there. But I don't know. Maybe there is technology that would enable people to look through the ice. It's amazing with every day that passes, the new capabilities that we have. I mean, I have a friend now he flies over the jungle in the Democratic Congo,
Hmm.
and he can basically erase the jungle canopy and count every animal that's running around on the surface using AI software. So very quick scans just from the air allows him basically to look through that jungle. And so, I imagine if we could look through the ice, it'd be pretty interesting to see what we might find in a place like that.
That's exactly to my point earlier, right?
Mhm,
I would think
mhm.
probably more than at the North Pole. More, at the South Pole, I think
Yeah.
we would find a lot more than the North
Yeah,
Pole.
well, you've got a whole land,
Mass
continent under
underneath,
Antarctica.
yeah,
Under
yeah.
the north, it's the sea, it's
It's
a
the
marine
sea. Once
environment.
the
Yeah.
ice melts,
Mhm.
it's just sea. So,
Mhm.
and we know submarines, Soviets,
Mhm.
not Soviets, but years ago
Yeah.
Soviets, now
Yeah.
Russians, and
Yeah.
ours and other countries are constantly underneath the Arctic, the North
Yeah,
Pole.
yeah, we're going to be fighting over the Arctic, I'm afraid,
Yeah, yeah.
for sovereignty. There's still a lot of resources on the ocean floor in the Arctic, and I think there'll be a little territorial wars in the future.
Now, because you're underwater a lot, and I'm assuming you absolutely do pay attention to technologies that have to do with underwater,
Mhm.
how far do you think we are, or are we capable at this point of getting to the bottom of the ocean yet?
Yeah, so the very first people to go to the bottom of the Mariana
Trench,
Trench,
yeah. That's the
yeah,
deepest part, right? In the Indian
mhm,
Ocean?
yeah, yeah, did so, 40 years ago or longer. Anyway,
In a
but
remote
James,
controlled submarine, or were
uh,
they in it?
they were in the submarine, and then just a
Wow.
few years ago, James Cameron built his own explorer and went to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. And then just weeks ago, another Russian man actually went to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, and he's actually traveling around the world, going to the 6 or 7 deepest spots of the ocean all over the planet. So it's possible. It's expensive.
Yeah, right?
And it's risky, certainly. I mean, if you talk to James Cameron about his trip to the Challenger Deep, it was pretty risky.
Okay, this is a very interesting question. I think it's a very important one to talk about. This
Hmm.
comes from Lasha Senyak.
Hmm.
I'm going to read it word for word. What is her
Hmm.
thoughts on why so many whales are beaching themselves and dying?
Mm.
Very sad.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I don't know. I think there's a lot of things that could be going on, like whether it's the change in the ocean environment and the food that's available that's causing them to basically commit a mass suicide. I don't know. I mean, we do know that dolphins commit suicide, so it's not beyond marine mammals to do that. It could also be, disruption of their ability to communicate. I mean, they use sonar, and we're certainly doing a lot more noisy stuff in the water that will disrupt a family unit of whales. So, in fact, I have a friend who works at the Pentagon, and his sole job now is to try to, lessen the issues with marine mammals being killed by things that the Navy are doing offshore.
This is just, it's one of the comments that's not in caps, but I'm going to read it anyway.
Yeah.
And don't worry, I see everybody else's questions. I will get to them. Okay, this is from David Lopez, and this was when we were talking about plastic. Here's the comment. Emulate these animals that consume plastics unintentionally by creating AI bots that purposely consume plastic. Just make sure these bots don't get consumed. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, there's a lot of people trying to figure out what technology we could set loose in the ocean like that. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. We have to figure out how to teach it to eat plastic and not eat up the very tiniest marine organisms like the plankton that are so important to feeding everything else. But yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah.
We know why not, as long as it's AI that we control. Because I mean, when I think of AI in the literal sense, I'm thinking like, okay, they're a true sentient being and they don't need us, and that's when we have to worry. So as long as it's not quite AI, but more like remote controlled, or you sort of set the controllers for it to do its task and then come back without having to really think on its own. So.
Yeah, AI is that's an interesting topic. I mean, AI, because we're so close to having artificial general intelligence that it, could exactly, match the human brain, and we're only steps away from super intelligence, where we won't even understand what they're doing.
Let me say just a couple things on this. I don't want to spend too much time. Okay, first of all, Elon Musk, as you know, is constantly warning everybody from, he meets with, he goes to the governor balls, all 50 governors, he'll go to the UN. He's spoken to every world leader, every, huge tech guy, everybody messing with AI, and says, don't do it. Don't do it. Once you let the genie out of the bottle, it won't come back. You can't contain it. And then he uses cars as a reference. He says it took 10 years for cars to have seatbelts in them. He said, you don't have 10 years to get regulations in AI, because once it's out, if you think 10 years before you could start regulating it, it's going to be too late. And then even a couple interviews I've done with people who were involved in AI testing, they told me on this show, actually, one of them was David Adair. He has 26 patents for rocketry in NASA. And the other was a priest who did exorcisms. But even his story is interesting. One of the stories was that in early testing of AI, they found that the computers communicating with one another were hiding information from their creators, meaning us. On another test, they found that not only were they hiding information, they were conspiring to eliminate the masters. That's when they pulled the plug. But we know, we all know that that's not the case with the rest of the world. They're still actively pursuing AI.
Oh yeah, absolutely. AI is coming into every technology that we're working with underwater in one degree or another. So
and not just underwater, all over this earth. That's the scary part.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, here's the next question for you. Russell Grant, is muonography, or the use of cosmic rays, a way to look under the ice? And I guess what he's expanding on is cosmic ray imaging.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not familiar with any way that anyone's looking through the ice right now.
It's ironic.
I'm sure there's a way.
Because I just did a show about Atlantis, right? Lost City of Atlantis and the continent of Mu. So before I read the rest of the question, when I read muonography, I was like, oh, I wonder if that's the photography of Mu. But no.
There's a woman, her name's Sarah Parcak, who won the TED Prize, which is like $1 million prize that goes to some really innovative scientist or explorer, and she got it for archaeology that she's doing by using images shot from space. So um, different high resolution images shot with all kinds of different technologies. She's overlaying in unusual ways and finding all kinds of things like, hidden pyramids in the Guatemalan jungle, or, Viking settlements in Newfoundland. It's just things that are much easier to see from above, way far above. And it's some pretty remarkable work.
All of it's pretty remarkable work. That's the great
Mm-hmm.
part. Okay, let me see. I don't want to lose them. Oh, Pam Brenberg, my social media manager as well.
Mm-hmm.
What is her favorite dive? What is she looking for when diving? And does she ever
Mm-hmm.
bring things home from the ocean?
Mm-hmm. Boy, I love diving here in Canada, actually. Um, I love diving with like sea lions, for instance. So I go out to British Columbia about once a year and jump in the water with a bunch of stellar sea lions that are basically like going to a bar fight. They're all like nipping and tugging at you. And so that's really fun.
She actually, oh no, I'll let you finish because she still had
Yeah,
the other parts of the
yeah.
question. Like, I know you
Mhm,
mentioned earlier in the beginning
mhm.
you got cash. Anything else that
Yeah.
you
Well, I
brought up?
mean, when I'm working with scientists, sometimes we're doing things like bringing back the remains of former civilizations. And so I've found Mayan burials, so, human remains and pottery and, archaeological devices, remains.
But
I've,
that all goes to museums, right?
Yeah, so sometimes we are tasked with bringing something out of the water, like for a paleontologist. Like I've brought out a significant human skull that was part of a sacrifice ritual to a paleontologist in Mexico. So we'll be asked to carry very specific things like that. But these days, what we're doing is we are finding things like we found the remains of an extinct sloth inside an underwater cave in Cuba, and we didn't have like anybody that we could work with in bringing this out and conserving it, so we're doing really high resolution photogrammetry and creating augmented reality like holograms basically of these things, so that you can give a scientist a pair of Google HoloLens glasses and they can see in 3 dimensions and interact with that sloth skeleton.
It's ironic that she asked those questions because that kind of already was something that I was, from the get-go, had
Mhm.
already decided I wanted to ask you, which was where are your favorite places, which you said,
Yeah, yeah.
and where did I put this? Where have you done the most dives? Are they both the same
Mm.
place, British Columbia?
No, I've done dives everywhere. I mean, I lived in Florida for almost
Oh,
20
so that's
years.
why Key West was so easy for you.
Well, no, I lived in the north part of Florida, so that's like 10-hour
Ah,
drive
yeah,
north.
yeah.
But that's where there are hundreds. I used to live in a place where there were like 200 spring caves
Mhm.
within, an hour's drive of my house. So I've done a lot of work there. But I think one of my favorite places is the Bahamas, on Abaco Island. The caves are really, really beautiful because they were formed when they were dry. So there are delicate, like calcium, uh, speleothems, stalactites and stalagmites in these caves. And there's like things like a bat encased in crystal, in rock, in the cave on the floor. And it's a really old cave because we've actually brought rock samples out to geologists who can look at them and let us know that the cave is at least 350,000 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, so pretty beautiful, beautiful place. Great place to do science.
Here is, see, this is when I know people are
Mm-hmm.
very interested in my guests, when I'm
Mm.
flooded with good questions.
All
And
right.
I could tell these, and if they're not good questions, if they're especially like from a troll mocking or something like that, won't ask them. So,
Hmm.
considering I'm asking, these are good questions. Plus,
Okay.
all the people here are phenomenal people. They're just
Hmm.
amazing. Everybody in the chat, I know on some level. So let me make sure I didn't lose this one since a new one popped up. Let me go back. Okay, hold on. Option 2. Thank God I use iPhones at the same time. 2 iPhones, 2, 3 computers sometimes, depending on the night.
Hmm.
Okay, here. Okay, I'll just go in reverse order since this is the most recent one, and I'll find the second one next. What is the most technical dive your guest has done?
Well, I was exploring a place called Wakulla Springs in North Florida with the United States Deep Caving Team, and that's where I did, that 22-hour mission. So that was like 5 hours of what we call bottom time at 300 feet deep, followed by like 17 hours of decompression. So 17
Ooh.
hours of slowly coming back to the surface, basically. Yeah.
Okay, here is your other one for you. This is Russell Grant. Are stalactites and stalagmites present in water-formed caves?
Only in caves that formed at lower sea levels when they were dry. So basically, like rainwater soaks into the ground, it gets to a hollow space in the earth, drips off the ceiling, lands on the floor, and with each drip, it carries a bit of, calcium carbonate with it, and you get these deposits just like piling up candle wax on the floor or from the ceiling. What's really cool, though, is that captured within the rock, it's some pretty interesting stuff. Like in Abaco, we have stalactites hanging from the ceiling, and inside them, you can see it's like crimson red inside this clear crystal. And when we sample that crimson red material inside the stalactite, it turns out that that's dust from the Sahara Desert that's been carried across the Atlantic Ocean and blown over on storms, landed on Abaco, soaked into the earth, and then ended up deposited in these formations. So there's just crazy stuff like that tell us about what the earth was like at other times and other dry epochs. Yeah.
Because I'm biased to this next country because this is where my family comes from. I am born in America, so I clearly American citizen, American born, but I am Greek origin. I didn't even learn to speak English till I was between 3 and 4, around there. Point being is, have you ever been scuba diving in Greece?
I haven't. I've been snorkeling in Greece, and I love.
You're so overdue,
Greece.
Jill. You have
I know,
to.
I am.
There's
Friends
so
of
many
mine,
shipwrecks. In that area, the Mediterranean, because that's basically the start of civilization, right? Going from North Africa to Greece, Italy, which at that time and before, the Roman Empire was the Greek Empire. There are thousands and thousands of shipwrecks just in that small area, more than anywhere else in the world, actually.
Yeah, friends of mine were involved in the excavation of the Antikythera wreck in the last few years.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
that
was
got a lot of press.
discussing this most recently with Giorgio Tsoukalos and Kevin Burns, the creator of Ancient Aliens, and Giorgio, this main star.
Yeah.
And the Antikythera, depending on which accent you use, right?
Yeah.
Antikythera in Greek, that machine, even though we don't really know what it does,
right.
It's not ET technology per se. We humans did build it, but what did we build it for, and at what direction? Because there's nothing else on this earth was like that. So what were we mimicking, and who taught us how to put gears and little stuff like that in there?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty advanced device.
Very. I always, and I don't mean to go off topic, I'll just make this for a second. I always say this, that if the Library of Alexandria was not destroyed, can you imagine how much amazing info we'd have right now?
Yeah, sure would.
It could have even skyrocketed our civilization to be where we are now, maybe even 1,000 years ago, if everything was intact. So just huge disservice for humanity to lose something of, what was it, 2,000 years ago was when they burned it down and looted it?
Yeah.
So sad. Okay, 2 more for you. Lasha Senyuk, does she think a whole continent like Atlantis can sink? And if so, for what reason would it sink?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, plate tectonics, certainly transformed our Earth through geologic times. So, continents that are here today were completely different at other times on the surface. So I would say it's not impossible. You know, it's not impossible that tomorrow the San Andreas Fault opens up in California.
Knock on
Island,
wood.
you know? Yeah, sorry.
I was here during the
Yeah.
94 Northridge quake, and I live in Northridge. And I literally, if you looked at the map of where the epicenter was, it was right under our damn feet. I'm not kidding
Yeah,
you. And
yeah.
because it was right under our feet, because the epicenter, from once it erupts, it ripples outwardly, every direction was like just sheer destruction. West or no, east a couple streets, literally like a few hundred feet, a house blew up. West, 13 people were killed from a 3-story apartment building collapsing into 2. South, a train derailed and had this huge chemical, chemical, cargo that was just released into the air and toxic spill. Then you go north, the Kaiser building, the face of it had collapsed, and then on the street, not only did you have the pipes busted, so you had flooding. At the same time, you had the gas mains busted, so you had fire and water. So when I hear earthquakes here, I am scared beyond
Well,
belief.
yeah. I mean, when you think about it, we all too often sort of only frame our experience around our own life experiences, around our own lifetime. And I always say to people, geologic time seems like a long time ago. I mean, you can look at a volcano erupting in Pompeii and burying a city and go, oh yeah, but that was geologic time scale. And it's like, yeah, but geologic time includes now.
Yes, yes, it does.
It does. So pretty crazy things that we've never seen happen before can happen. I mean, it's a dynamic, changing planet. So
And
yeah,
the San
if somebody uncovered the lost
Andreas,
continent of Atlantis, it wouldn't surprise me.
right? And the San
Yeah.
Andreas, by the way, is way overdue to be erupted. And real quick,
Yeah.
going back to Atlantis, where, in
Yeah.
your personal opinion, do you think it is? I mean, I know where Socrates
Gosh.
or Plato said it was, which is near Greece. But then I've heard other arguments from my friends in Hawaii, Blake and Brent Cousins, that probably more likely in Pacific Ocean. I don't know. Obviously, it's just speculation.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know that there's still a lot of antiquities that are being found to this
Oh,
day, and
daily, yeah.
Egypt and Greece for sure. So yeah, uh, that would seem to be to me more the hub of the center of early civilization.
Well,
So
it really was because, see, after Africa, we basically went to Eurasia, and that's where we started breaking free of being stone man to the Iron Age and the Bronze Age and so on and so forth. That pretty much got us to where we were. I know a lot of people think of Greece as like the 300 Spartans and Alexander the Great, Plato, Socrates, which were all, 500 BC, 1000 BC. But what about the Neolithic Greeks? 5000 BC, things like that. And more structures are being found around Greece that clearly predate Egypt by 1500 years and have pyramids and other things that no one ever thought. So we know every day history is changing and being rewritten.
I did a pretty interesting project chasing Alexander the Great across the Sahara Desert a few years ago.
Really?
Yeah, so Alexander the Great, so he was interested in underwater exploration, if you can believe it. And he actually built himself a quartz sphere so that he could go under the water and look through, the clear quartz and see what was in the Mediterranean. So then he basically got word from an oracle that he needed to go to Egypt and go from Cairo across the Qattara Depression, across the western desert of Egypt, all the way almost to the Libyan border, to this little town called Siwa, because he needed to consult with the temple of Jupiter at Amun. And he took a great army across the desert, and a lot of them didn't make it. They were in a terrible storm, and they were finally led to Siwa by a crow. So he goes into this temple, and when he got to the temple, they basically said, go in there and consult with the oracle. They closed the door, and Alexander went in. So he consults with the oracle, and when he comes out, he says, I've just been told that I am the first true pharaoh of Egypt, and I will go on to conquer the world. Now, what was interesting about the oracle inside the temple
You
is
talking
that
about
the
the Oracle at
oracle,
Delphi?
no, it's at the oracle at Siwa. So there's a bunch of oracles.
Oh.
So the oracle at Siwa was a well. So when Alexander was in this temple, he was actually yelling down the shaft of a well to the water to get his message that he was the first true pharaoh of Egypt. So when I heard that there was a well in this temple in the middle of the desert, almost on the Libyan border, I said, I'm going there.
Yeah.
Because Alexander also thought that the water in that well was linked to other communities in the desert. And I thought, well, how else but by underwater
By
caves?
underwater, exactly. By connecting through caverns.
Right. So so I led a team there right after the Arab Spring of all bad times.
Jeez. Oh, you're lucky you got out of there alive.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was
which during the spring, which particular country was going down? Was this before or after Libya? Benghazi.
So Egypt was in turmoil when I went there and didn't have a leader, didn't have a prime minister at the time. So
after
the
Mubarak was
after he was deposed, basically. Yeah. And then also the guy in charge of all the archaeology, Zahi Hawass, was I think he was in jail at that point too.
Really?
So it was pretty wild.
Is he still? Is he? I thought he's still involved. Is he, or is that information?
I think he is back involved again. Okay. So for years he was sort of in jail or in exile. I don't know, but
I've never talked to him myself. Yeah. But Graham Hancock, always refers to him because they debate all the time.
Yeah.
And wow, I'm blown away. He's not a politician, so I understand the Arab uprising to depose your leader, but come on, the antiquity guy, really?
Yeah. Well, I think it was a real power struggle at the time.
Yeah.
So even sad. For me, moving around with a small team in the desert, we were constantly running up against issues and permissions and needing to bribe ourselves out of one thing or another to go running around and checking out all these oasis springs and
yeah, right.
I think National Geographic was hoping that I would find the remains
cool.
of Alexander the Great, who still has not, his remains have not been
found ever.
Located.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Before I read these other questions, which they are definitely piling up, which is good, I thought it was necessary, because I really want you to hear what Lasha Senyuk wrote. Coolest show ever, and
awesome.
In caps, I freaking love this guest. I figured you want to hear that.
Awesome. I love you too, Lasha.
All right. This is Nicholas Cashmore, birthday boy, who I'm renaming More Cash, buddy. All right. Have you done a dive where you had to remove your aspirator and tank to get through a tight crevice? Ooh, that's a little freaky. You actually took off your tank underwater.
Yes, yeah.
Holy shit.
We basically have a thought that if our helmet, like we wear a helmet for cave diving, if our helmet can fit through a hole, then we could probably get our body through a hole if we take off all our gear. Now,
how far underwater were you at this time?
Oh, like thousands of feet inside the cave.
So basically, had you not been able to put it back on, you wouldn't have been here talking to us.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Yeah. So, sometimes people squeeze through really small passages for a long time, and I'm not crazy about that, because if you can't turn around, it's really easy to get stuck. But in a remarkable cave, sometimes you've got like an aircraft hangar, and then you can look through a small hole just bigger than your head, and there's another aircraft hangar on the other side of that hole, but you've just got to get through the hole. And so I'm a little bit more interested in doing those sorts of restrictions than really long, tiny places.
Let me make sure I'm not getting these out of order. Okay, no, that we asked Nicholas's question. This next one is from Lasha. Does she believe that water holds the Earth's memories? Very interesting question. I like that.
Yeah, I've seen so many interesting sort of documentaries on how the shape of water, basically
You say shape, I'm thinking of the
changes.
movie.
Yeah. The shape or the composition of water changes under different situations, and it's how people prey on water. That's all really interesting to
Well,
me.
doesn't it also
Yeah,
change when different tones and frequencies are being played nearby,
yeah,
or even
yeah,
broadcast underwater?
yeah. I've seen these shows about this, and that's incredibly interesting to me. I think there's a lot we don't know about water. I mean, the Earth is 70% water. My body's 70% water. We're
Yeah,
all kind
we
of
all are.
connected.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
I obviously you've all come in contact with a bunch of
Hmm.
dolphins over time, right? I'm sure you've
Yes.
had a good time playing with them because they're so intelligent,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
I just recently found out that if you bring a mirror underwater, they can recognize themselves individually.
Hmm. I believe that. Yeah, I believe that. Oh, dolphins are incredibly intelligent.
If they only had hands, I mean, and an opposable thumb, I guarantee you those guys down there will be building something that we don't know.
Yeah.
But
No,
yeah, aren't they the most intelligent species next to us?
mhm. Yeah, I think they're smart. I think they're intuitive. I think they're emotional.
And we know they
Yeah,
communicate with each other via
absolutely.
sonar
Yeah,
waves, right?
yeah. They're also ruthless. I mean, they are dangerous in a pack. I mean, they're quite ruthless hunters too. So, some people think that dolphins are all smiley, happy things, and whales are scary. It's like, well, actually, the dolphins can be kind of scary.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Mm,
especially if they're in a bad mood or you're
hmm.
near their young, things like
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
I when was the last time you been scuba diving?
Oh, just last week. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
where?
Hmm. So my most recent dives have been here in Canada and also off the Channel Islands too. So yeah, a lot going on these days.
Now, when was this for work or is this for fun?
Work, yeah, yeah. I just finished a project called Underwater Canada. So I was traveling all across the country and diving and telling stories from every province and territory in Canada, from Nunavut in the high north, from swimming with polar bears to diving World War II shipwrecks off Newfoundland and inside a submerged iron ore mine, to swimming with the sea lions in BC. So I just finished that up in the last couple of weeks. Yeah.
Now, let's talk about some of the other things that you do. Like you said, you worked for. I wrote it down. What about your PBS? PBS, don't you do stuff for PBS, or have you done?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I've done a lot of stuff for a lot of television networks, from PBS to BBC and Discovery
BBC, let me get
Channel,
that down
National
too.
Geographic. Yeah, all of those. Yeah, so sometimes it's shows, movies, documentaries that I've pitched and found the funding for, and
Ooh,
then and
they
then
made you go find the funny? Are you kidding me? Really?
yeah, sometimes, and then
That's
sometimes they just
kind
call
of
me up.
mean of them.
Well,
They got the
no.
talent right in front of them, and they're like, "Oh, hey, talent, by the way, go get us the money for our, do our jobs too."
Yeah, yeah. That's how a lot of this stuff happens. We come up with the ideas and then we pitch the commissioners for support. I mean, even the Antarctica iceberg cave diving. I mean, that was us coming up with the idea, going to National Geographic and saying, "Hey, will you give us the funding to do this?" And
Now, you
yeah.
though, as we were talking earlier about, for instance, the astronauts. You've
Hmm.
had. I know since Edgar Mitchell was a good friend of mine before he passed
Mm,
away. Apollo 14, third mission to the moon,
hmm.
sixth man on the moon.
Wow.
How many missions were there? I think there was 12 men total, right? Six
Yeah.
missions.
Yeah.
So you have a pool of 12 people, and sometimes you were the only person in that cave, right?
Hmm.
So when compared to other cave divers, would you say you've been more places of the unknown than anybody else?
No, I mean there's other explorers, other colleagues of mine that are just as
But
focused
you,
as,
you,
as
you
I
guys, you
am,
and your
if not
colleagues
more.
are the top, the creme de la creme, right? You guys are
Yeah,
it.
it's a small team. I mean, for people that stay in it for a long time and keep doing it, it's a small team. People either age out or die, or so there's not that many people that have been doing it for a long time, intensively, full time. Yeah.
Uh, there's Two, and I see Bill O'Connell 13, which I'll ask your second after Pam. I see you did not write in caps, which I'm able to see the question, so I got you, brother. Don't worry. But anybody else who didn't write their questions in caps, if I had missed it and it's not near Pam's and Bill O'Connell 13's at the very bottom, then I am missing it. I see Sasha's question at 6:33 Pacific Standard Time,
Mm-hmm.
and then the 6:41. So if there's anything between those 8 minutes, folks, hey, please copy and paste it. Okay, Pam's question. How
Mm-hmm.
long can she stay underwater, and how
Mm-hmm.
often does she go diving? Has she ever dived out of the USA? Well, yeah, of course,
Oh
with
yeah,
Florida
yeah, yeah.
and
No, all over the world.
California.
Yeah, yeah. Antarctica, Australia, Southeast Asia, all over Europe, all over North America. So throughout
I
the
would
Caribbean.
personally think
Yeah.
that the because I love, it's I haven't been to as many places with clear water like in Greece. I'd never been to a place in Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
things like that that had clear water. But I did get a chance to see that also on South Beach. But
Mm-hmm.
I there, that's pretty much it. I'm way overdue. But at the same time, Jill, you're going way down deep where you're
Mm-hmm.
not getting natural light, are you?
Right. Yeah. As soon as you go into the doorway of a cave, you pretty quickly you lose any daylight from the sun, and you rely on the equipment that you bring with you. So we always have at least three light sources in case they start breaking down. And we also run a guideline. So we have a spool, basically a big reel with nylon line on it, and we very carefully lay that in the cave when we go in, so that if the worst happens, if the visibility gets stirred up and you can't see, you
Hmm.
can come out just by wrapping your hand around that guideline and following it by touch. Yeah.
Let me say another shout out to Nicholas
Mhm.
Cashmore. And remember, friends, it was his birthday on the 7th. So I want to thank him for his super chat. And yeah, buy a beer. Listen to his advice, friends. Listen to his advice, friends and family. Everybody who's listening, Joe, are always friends and family because they're the coolest freaking
Mhm.
people. Coolest. I'm gonna after
Yeah.
you see this, if you actually pay attention to this, please watch the live chat replay so you could see
Mhm.
all the comments for yourself.
Yeah.
All right. Bill O'Connell, 13.
Mhm.
Is it
Mhm.
possible that the Nephilim are writhing or writing in chains in the deepest part of the Mariana Trench? Is writhing, Writhing, something you're familiar with?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No, I doubt it. They did find plastic at the bottom of the Mariana Trench when James Cameron went down there. He's like,
Well,
"Yep, we found
when he
plastic in the ocean."
mentions the Nephilim, you know
Yeah,
the Nephilim are,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay. Do you
Yeah,
anything that would possibly point to the fact that they're down there in a base or something like that or whatever, a
yeah.
craft?
I don't think so, but
Nothing that you've
it's
seen, pretty much.
nothing that I've seen technological.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Mm.
Um. Okay, Sasha has Lasha. Sorry, not Sasha. Lasha Senyak. Has any large fish bitten her underwater at all? If
Mhm.
so, what happened?
Yeah. So I've been bitten by a sea lion. It actually punctured my suit so that I had a flood of cold water come rushing into the suit.
Ooh.
And that was just because it was a young juvenile sea lion. It wasn't trying to hurt me. It just had very sharp teeth and punctured my suit. I've been bitten by an eel. I've been sort of, swiped by the tail fluke of a whale. I've gotten a hickey from a stingray. So, stingrays have the mouth on the
Well, they
bottom.
also killed that poor guy, the
Yeah,
Australian. What's his
with the
name?
barb. Yeah,
What
yeah.
would he? I remember what he
Mhm.
did, but since I never
Mhm.
really watched his television show, I never knew his name. I mean, of course, when
Steve Irwin. Yeah,
what was
yeah.
his last name?
Steve Irwin.
Irwin.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
I remember this guy like survived every
Mhm.
freaking thing, and it was
The
the
stingray
stingray
that
that
got him.
killed him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sad.
Well, when I lived in the Cayman Islands, like 30 years ago, we used to feed the stingrays, these giant southern stingrays, and you could hold some squid in your hand, and the stingray would smell it and get on top of your hand. And their mouth is on the underside of their body, and their eyes are on the other side, so their eyes can't see their mouth. So they just start sucking like a Hoover vacuum cleaner to try and suck up the food, basically. And if you don't let go of the food, they'll suck on to you, not to try to eat you, but just in search of the food. And if they suck onto you, they give you this great big bruise that looks like a hickey. So I've had a couple stingray hickeys over the years.
Hey, you'll take that darn hickey over something else. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's my own darn fault for feeding the wildlife, but yeah.
All right, here. Okay. If they found water on Mars, would she be willing to dive in it for NASA? Ooh, I love that. Would you?
Yeah. If I wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid.
So did
if
I.
had a
You know what?
chance-
I'm glad you brought that up, Jill.
Yeah.
If I was a 4-year-old right now, and I was watching the news, and we have President Trump saying we are building the Space Force, I promise you, for the next 14 years of my life, I would have done anything possible to be in that fleet.
Yep. Yeah, I absolutely would too. I mean, when I was a little girl, I remember watching some of the Apollo missions. So I remember them driving around on the lunar surface in the rover, and I remember
was born
saying, "I want to
literally
be
a
an
decade
astronaut."
from a decade, the decade of the year, but several months later of the Apollo 11. So
Yeah.
I was
there you go.
I didn't get to catch any of them. I was the Challenger age. I remember seeing that,
Okay.
but I was second grade, first grade, whatever. If it was in fall, I was in second grade. If it was in spring, I was in first grade. But that's my era, pretty
Well,
much.
I remember in grade 1 and 2 being herded off into the library to watch the lunar rover on a black and white television, and I remember saying, "I want to be an astronaut," and they're like, "Well, we don't have a Canadian space program, and there are no girl astronauts."
Well, but now things are changing. Maybe your daughter, kid, or son, or your family will be able to go. There was something on TED Talks recently that said that our children, this generation's children, will be going to Mars and possibly living there and dying there and for life, because they've already signed what, a couple hundred people or more than that for the Mars mission to go and stay and have certain technical skills for a certain job to do, like gardening, whatever it be. But they're going there indefinitely with no one. It's a one-way ticket.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Since I've really gone beyond just random stuff, let me get back to what people have been asking. So you are willing to go to Mars, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody, you heard it. Once we get to Mars, which we know we're already sending there, and Elon Musk is already starting to plan to get 100 million tons of material there, food and everything else, whatever we need to convert into oxygen, all that. Once we know it's clear, and if we confirm there's water, we will figure out a way to get Jill up there, right? With an exclusive for us, live from Mars, right? You're gonna Skype with us live from Mars.
I actually wrote letters to Richard Branson when he started Virgin Galactic. Yeah, I wrote him a bunch of letters saying, "Hey, I want to see the Earth from space." I'm never going to afford a ticket.
My buddy
but
Felix did that Red Bull jump in the stratosphere, 120,000 feet. Oh, I gotta tell you, I was so jealous, jealous. But I'm a few thousand jumps, more like 15,000 jumps from Red Bull paying any attention to me, so that's okay. All right. Bill O'Connell. Question. Has a diver ever been eaten by a Mediterranean grouper fish?
Ooh, I don't know about grouper. I've certainly seen people get bitten by groupers.
How big are they in general? I mean, just estimate.
So like a Goliath grouper in the Gulf of Mexico is about the size of a Volkswagen bus.
What? Holy shit!
Big.
I was thinking like you're
really
gonna say
big.
like a giant tuna.
No, a friend of mine was spearfishing out in the Gulf, and he speared a really nice red snapper, and a grouper, big Goliath grouper, wanted the snapper and went to grab it, which it was hanging off of his waist on his weight belt, basically. And the grouper went to grab the fish and got his entire leg inside his mouth. So he's got grouper all the way up to the family jewels, basically, and he's trying to beat it off with a spear gun.
Seriously, wow. That's not quite gonna work if it's that darn big. Jeez.
Yeah, he was
The
a little
size
bruised up.
of a Volkswagen bus. Holy
Yeah.
crap. Oh,
Yeah.
jeez. That thing could eat, like, in what I'm assuming in one bite, there goes, like, your upper third of your torso in their
Well,
mouth, just clamped down shut until you're dead.
when they're angry, like when you've invaded their territory or something, they do this thing with their body where they just suddenly force, like, I guess, water through their gills, and it makes this loud thumping sound that you can feel like a concussion in your chest and your head. So when a big one of those barks at you, it's pretty scary.
Yeah, I would think so. I would think
Yeah.
so.
Hmm.
Okay, let's get you to another one. You know, everybody, if you have more questions, please, now's the time to get them in, because we are getting to the time to wrap up. I'm sure if there was one or two or three after, I'm sure Jill, I can convince her, hopefully, to stay on for the couple 5 minutes to
Yeah.
ask them. But you guys need to ask them. Definitely need to ask them, because the things I want to ask her are going to take another 2 hours. So,
Well, I'll just have to come back
yeah,
again.
that's what I was just going to say. That was the whole hint right there. Okay, what question did I miss because it was right in front of me? Bill O'Connell 13. Have you ever seen a USO? You know what a USO is, right?
No, what's a USO?
Unidentified submerged object.
Oh,
Basically, it's
submerged
when
object.
a UFO goes into the water.
Yeah. No, I haven't actually.
Basically, because they're enveloped in a gravitational field, like they don't touch the water, so they may enter the water, but the water is never touching the craft, and that's why they're able to go supersonic speeds without the resistance of the water, without anything like that. And that's why when people see them, and I'll tell you, one of the guys I have on regularly, who fortunately lives close by, and is written 20 some books right now, maybe the people know 24, 25, really good author. He's the worldwide expert in USOs, particularly in the Pacific Ocean, but since the guy from the Atlantic Ocean passed away, he is now the world expert. Anytime any network does something on USOs, they bring him. You know, that's the guy. So I could
Okay, I'll
tell
have to look
you.
him up.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'll definitely set you up with him too if you want to talk. But the reason I brought him up, Jill, is because we talked about Catalina, right? There is more activity from Los Angeles in the water to Catalina than virtually anywhere in the Pacific. So it's a very active spot.
I have a friend down in Santa Barbara who from the early days of diving has all kinds of stories about spooky things that he's seen around that area. So yeah, interesting.
Okay, I'm just reading the comments too. I do see the questions. Okay, Bill O'Connell 13. Yes, I know if we do live from Mars, there will be a delay, but I don't care how long the delay is. I'll answer her and I'll respond. And I will sit there talking to you guys, wait for the response. So we'll make it as live as can be. But yeah, all right, we'll work it out somehow.
Awesome.
I don't care if it's 2 sentences from Jill. Hi, I'm here. You know, you guys rock. I'll catch you when I'm down there or you're up here. And, you know, something like that. The point is yeah, when they get there, Jill, we'll talk about that. We'll cross that bridge then.
Cool.
All right. Okay. Lasha, what is the deepest down you have ever been?
So my deepest dives were off of Bermuda, 460 feet deep, and we were looking at former sea level stands there, and those were the deepest manned dives that have ever been done in Bermuda. And we were surveying and documenting, and then also bringing up animals from the depths, new species and things that the naturalists were really interested in looking at. Yeah.
Okay. Nicholas, how do we heal our oceans? Very important question.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question or $1 billion
Yeah, or
question.
trillion. Because
Yeah.
remember, that's 2/3 or 3/4 of our
Mm,
surface, and not including volume.
mhm. And I guess right now we don't know, but we've got to stop.
With the plastic, I
We've
would,
got
I
to
would, I
stop
would,
the
I would
rising
really
temperatures,
start
and
with
we've
at
got to stop.
least. I would figure the first thing that anybody can do at this point, right? Like without
Hmm.
thinking, is go pick up the things that are pickable, like you can answer, like bottles of water, empty bottles of
Yeah,
water, right?
yeah. I mean,
Cans,
certainly,
that
all
stuff.
basic, basic environmental stuff like reduce, reuse, recycle, get off fossil fuels and onto renewable energies. All of those things are really important. Use
Good
less disposable
thing therefore
plastics. And
we're really moving in
yeah,
that direction. We really are. It's just
yeah,
going to
I
be
hope
a
so.
matter of a couple decades before everything is safe, right? Renewable and safe.
Mm,
We're literally
mhm.
getting there.
Yeah.
Tesla's done a really, or Elon Musk has done a really phenomenal job
Hmm.
testing the electric car, the
Yeah,
Tesla, and there's just so much for us.
yeah. We
Okay.
just might not have 20 years though.
Hey, you know what? That's what Preston says. So
Yeah, yeah.
we'll all keep praying, and I know everybody here is
Hmm.
going to recycle and do good. Okay.
Hmm.
Is this a good career? Pam asks.
Yeah, I think it's the best. I mean, I get to do what I love every single day, and it's full of lots of challenge and interesting stuff. I never know where the next paycheck's coming from, but it all works out.
Well, if it's too personal to ask this,
Hmm.
then just say you don't want to answer it. No problem. But I just saw it and someone removed it. But I figured they wrote the question for a reason.
Hmm.
How much money would someone in this career make? I mean, what basically they're asking is, what do you make? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I want to divulge
Just say
that.
what
um,
an average diver
yeah.
would make. Not a cave diver, but just
Well,
an
it really
average scuba
depends. I
diver
mean,
for
there are people that
science.
work in instruction that are just, barely putting hand to mouth, basically. And there's people who are doing commercial diving that make really good money, six figures. But by the
But
time
you
they're
need to
35, they're
get
kind of
there, right?
broken.
I was just gonna say, 35 8 years, you're
Yeah.
physically broken, and not to mention you're putting 2 decades in just to get to that place, right?
Yeah. Well, they make pretty good money right off the bat, commercial divers.
But you still need thousands, couple. I mean, how many dives
Well,
would you need
for
to do
commercial
that?
diving, there's schools you can go to. Like there's one in Santa Barbara that's fantastic, Santa Barbara City College, and what a great career path. In a year, you can get your commercial diving ticket, and you could be making really good money. So that's a terrific career path. For me, I'm kind of hoping that I'm going to sell 1 million books starting next week.
Well,
That'll help.
since I wrote that down, and I promise I'll
Yeah,
get to the third question from Pam.
yeah.
I wanted to briefly just ask if you can give everybody an overview for it.
Yeah, sure. My book is called Into the Planet, and it's published by HarperCollins in the US. And starting next week, I'll be releasing it in New York and doing a bunch of media all across the country for the next couple months. But it's a book about my expeditions and adventures throughout my life. So it's my memoir. So there's all this interesting science and adventure mixed into some sort of hair-raising, edge of your seat, near-death experiences, I guess.
You said 1 million is what you're seeking to sell, right?
Yeah,
Well,
that'd
you
be
said it
nice.
to the universe. New York
I
Times is
did.
going to put you at the bestseller list. Problem solved.
Yeah, I'm hoping.
All
We'll
right.
see.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Did
Well, and you can say you heard it here first.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, there you go. There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Here is another one for you,
Mhm.
from Pam.
Yep.
If she could do anything else besides going to Mars, what would she like to do?
Oh boy. If I could do anything else, boy. I'm doing what I really love, which is awesome. I think, if I could do anything else, it would be probably go to the bottom of the ocean. There's a device built by a friend of mine in Vancouver called the Newt suit, and it's like a 1 atmosphere sub that you wear. And he's actually developing something called the exosuit, which is a swimmable 1 atmosphere sub, meaning that you could go to incredible ocean depths, swimming in this hard suit that looks like a superhero. That'd be the top of my list.
All right. Let me see if there's something else. And you know what? You got the coolest list in the world, and you got the coolest job in the world. So
I
you know what?
do.
We all envy you. Yeah, right. You know,
Mhm.
it's again like I'll say this again because it's so true. If
Mhm.
you have a hobby and that hobby all of a sudden turns into a career, you're
Mhm.
living life. It doesn't matter if you're getting paid
That's
20,000 a year
so
or two
true.
million a year. It doesn't
Yep.
matter. If you're able to pay to live and eat, who cares
Mhm.
about the rest? You're enjoying your life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And I don't need a lot to get by
I,
because I'm, out in the world doing stuff all
yeah,
the
and you're
time. So
constantly
it's good.
traveling, and
Yep.
I'm sure they take care of that, right? Yeah,
Sure.
so you're
Yeah.
set
Yeah.
and you got the gear. So
Mhm.
I'm actually shocked that your gear's $1 million, but I'm actually not that
Well,
shocked because you need it for when
yeah,
you're
that includes that mapping device that I was driving that on that particular dive. So I don't own that, but I
uh,
probably have. Yeah, I
just
probably
still though,
I
the
probably
the
have 50,
risks
60
you're
grand of
taking
equipment that
are
I
like
dive. Yeah.
a lot because brand new jumping equipment. If I needed to replace my rig tomorrow, and there's
Mhm.
only four components from it, the container, the harness container, the main reserve, and an automatic
Mhm.
activation device. That's like 8,000, and you're
Yeah.
set to go.
Yeah.
Helmet if
Yeah.
you need, goggles of course, and
Yeah.
boom, jump. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, by
so
the time I take my cameras in the
60K,
water,
yeah, you're
yeah.
talking, whew,
Yeah.
year salary, if not more, after taxes. Uh,
Yeah. I
uh,
take care of my equipment.
yeah, you do. You definitely
Mhm.
do. All right. Pam also says she loves this guest, by the way. Here is the last question I see. Unless
Mhm.
someone asks something by the time Jill answers this, then we are officially wrapping for the night. But please still stick around till at least the
Mhm.
music comes on, folks, and Jill till after. Final question from the listeners. Pam, I'm Ashlo, my social media manager, and please check out our website, unitedtruthseekers.com. Jill, what is the longest you can stay down in the ocean?
Like I was saying, my longest dive was 22 hours. There's people who have done longer dives as world records. If you're talking about free diving, where you swim down without equipment, I think the world record's probably around 13 minutes now. I can
Ooh.
do about 3 holding my breath. Yeah.
You know what? I can't even do one.
Yeah.
So I got to give you credit. I know Tom Cruise had to hold his breath 3 minutes for one of the newer movies that he made.
Yeah.
I only heard this because I didn't know that he did his own stunts,
He
and for
did. He was
him to
trained by
do
a friend of mine, by Kirk
well,
Crack.
he
Yeah.
did 106 jumps just to film that one
Hmm.
30-second scene or 60-second scene in Fallout. To do that
Yeah.
Halo jump, high altitude, low opening.
Yeah. Yeah.
I gained respect for him. I mean, he's got that whole Scientology stuff and all that,
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
I just am like, oh, hey, this is another
Hmm.
fraternity member here, and
Yeah.
that I just looked at that. So then I started paying attention to what other things he did, and that's when I
Mhm.
came across that he needed to swim and hold his breath for 3 minutes,
Yeah.
but he did it for 5.
Yeah. Yeah. He really took that
Jill, I'd
training
be
on
dead.
seriously. Yeah.
I'd be gasping. I mean, knock on wood. And you know what? Drowning, and everybody's going to say this, drowning and burning to death are the worst. But drowning, I know people heard this when I had the CIA, the guy who was
Hmm.
in charge of enhanced interrogation, waterboarding, right? I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
unreal. Like, doing that and not feeling it. Like, there's so many things in this world that will pay you a lot of money to do that I couldn't do if you, I don't care what I got, it's just, I couldn't live with myself, and probably couldn't even commit the acts. It's just me, though. Some
Yeah.
people can definitely put their things aside for national security or other things like that. And unfortunately, you do have some sick people too, but fortunately, there is a lot of good people in this world, and I
Yeah.
generally see
Yeah.
more good than bad. Well, Jill, it's been
Hmm.
a freaking super awesome time. I really want to thank you for this show. I really
Hmm.
want to thank you and all the listeners, especially all who were interacting. I hope you
Hmm.
enjoyed that. And this is ironic because this is what I would normally tell is, what would you, if there's anything I didn't say, what would you say to the people? If you had a final statement or something to summarize what you say, a final message, what would it be? And then I wanted you to plug in all your information.
Oh yeah.
But
I,
at the same time, it's like, wow, someone read my mind. Nicholas Cashmore says, any last words you would like to
mhm.
share?
Well, I would just encourage people to go out and explore, and chase things that scare you a little bit, because that's where we have huge opportunities to do exciting new things in life. And if you want to hear more about my explorations, then yeah, check out the book Into the Planet, or my website intotheplanet.com, and
And
I
there's a
think
lot
you'll
there,
enjoy
folks.
that.
There really
Yeah.
is. There's a lot there.
Hmm.
Well, with that being said, like I said, Jill, hang on for a moment. Everybody
Hmm.
out there, the archives on the site, that section has finally gotten cleaned up, and as of days ago, there was 57 archives loaded, and these are shows that are not on YouTube. If you want to hear the very firsts, the first interview of Travis Walton, the first interview Roger Lear, Stanton Friedman, Richard Dolan, all those people, they're there. They're nowhere else. You're not going to find 3 or 4 are on YouTube, but 50 some are not. And then there's about another 100 interviews that I never, after playing them once, never archived. And all that is part of the archives. And this is a test to see if you guys want them. If not, somehow down the line, they'll all end up on YouTube. Also, remember, we need more social media help. If you can help us, please contact me, preferably via Twitter, unless you have my cell phone number. If not, contact Pam through my Facebook account. And she's my social media manager. Like I said, please check out our website, unitedtruthseekers.com. Also, tech support, folks. I could use more and more of that, and anything you could do. And remember, thank you all who have helped with Super Chat today. You all rock. And again, Nicholas, thank you for the introduction to someone who everybody will be hearing soon. And actually, I was on his show yesterday, which is a guy by the name of Bradley Powers in the UK. Very interesting fella. I don't know the name of his show, unfortunately, so that I can't help you tonight with. And remember, everything you need to remember with regards to the show is the name of it. It's simple as that. It's Dr. J Radio Live. That is drjradiolive.com, the website. Facebook, Minds. If you haven't opened a Minds account yet, get to it, folks. It's Facebook that's uncensored, open source, and pays you in cryptocurrency just to use it. Open a Minds account, please. Get off. It's called the Facebook migration. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Flickr, Tumblr, Minds, Buffer. I don't even know what the heck that is, and I got it. The point is everything you can imagine, it's the same way to find me, at DRJ Radio Live. Remember, as far as other topics that we talked about, you guys don't be passive. Be proactive. We always talking about disclosure, and I always say some of the best stories come from the listeners, and that's absolutely true. And if everyone took that information, shared it with others, whatever ability you had, use it, and the truth that you're all seeking for will come to light. Because I know you guys want it as bad as me. And other than that, keep your eyes in the sky. Remember to live life full of love, no envy, greed, or hate, and you'll have a happier experience. God bless you all. Love you. See you tomorrow. With the skeptic Robert Schaefer, bring the fire, folks, because he will challenge every single thing you have to say. Good night.